getting into this topic. The whole week will be about idolatry, and more specifically, what that looks like today. So what we're terming modern idolatry. So today, Roger and I are going to kick off the week by just introducing this topic, going over what it means in a more basic sense, looking at it in different places in the Old Testament as well as the New, and then hopefully have some encouraging words, challenging but encouraging words for us as we consider how idolatry can creep into our own hearts. So it's going to be a good show.
Creeping into our hearts is exactly it, right? That when I think about idolatry, I think about like a very like sneaky little snake in the grass. Just something that has been out there that is ever present since the beginning of the fall, and really it being Lucifer, the father of lights, or the light bearer is the name of his the meaning of his name. Since he fell, he desires worship. He wants God's creation to stumble and fall, and to find other idols, definitely him, but anything that would usurp or go above the name and the person of God, the living God, the I am. And so the devil's plan is to promote idolatry. And he knows that the heart of man is fallen, and it is susceptible. It is weak and corrupt and wicked. So he has a good hand. You know, he's like, I have an advantage, he thinks.
Yeah.
You know, he thinks, right? But praise God, we have, for those who have been born again, regenerated by the Holy Spirit, we have this divine nature given to us by God in 1 Peter chapter 1. So the divine nature. So when I think about idolatry, and maybe as we just kick this off in a broad way, because this week, everyone who's listening, this week is going to be awesome, because each day is going to have a set of focused words, like family, right? Work. What were the other ones? There's a couple other ones.
Like celebrities, sports, power.
There's these words that will definitely unlock maybe something that in our hearts could be a form of idolatry.
Yes, things that we can glorify in our lives.
Modern idolatry, we would say it is very much the same idolatry that was there at the garden, as it was born, sin entering into the heart of man, and then moving forward. So idolatry is to us something that we need to recognize as potential. Could be a seed. It could be very small.
Yeah.
And let's remember that I think what we'll try to do today is like kind of paint the picture of what it was like then in the Old Testament and what it is like today. And when you compare it, it's actually quite the same.
Yeah.
Right? It just has like new skin.
Yeah, it's like reinvented, same thing.
It has plastic now. It has, instead of tapestries, it has, these other threads.
Yeah.
Like what are the threads of today, of 2024,
Yeah.
So when we look at it, Exodus chapter 20, the first two commandments, right? The first two commandments. But before we begin, you can read it at Exodus chapter 20. It says in verse 2, I am the Lord your God. I am the Lord your God. That can be something that can set us all free from this. I am, and we watched an amazing video. You can Google it. He is on YouTube. Watch that video and just be set free
It lists all the names of God in a really incredible,
From
powerful
Genesis
way.
to Revelations. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable. I am the Lord your God, personal.
Yeah.
And it says, and this is, remember, like when he gives these first two commandments, which are about idolatry,
Yeah.
about having singleness of eye, singleness of heart, he's saying, first, I am. He's not giving us commandments without providing
Yeah.
a way of escape,
Yeah,
a person to
I was
focus
just
and
going
look
to
to.
say that if you start at Exodus 20, what you would miss is the 19 chapters before it, where God is in many, many different ways showing the people of Israel who he is.
Yeah.
He has shown them his care for them. They were in slavery in Egypt, and he heard their cries from heaven, and he provided a way of escape for them. He demonstrated his unbelievable power over the Egyptian kingdom was the greatest
Right.
kingdom of the world. He, through the plagues that he performed through Moses, he displayed his power, his omnipotence was fully on display all the way through, leading them out of Egypt.
Yeah.
And then they're being chased by the Egyptians, and he divides the Red Sea so they can walk on dry land and be freed. So all of those things, and then feeding them in the wilderness with manna. So I was thinking about that. I was reading these commandments. He first proved himself over and over and over again to be worthy of their worship and of their single devotion. He proved that there is no other God like him. There are no gods before him. And then he says, here are these commandments that I want you to walk before me in. So I just think that's important to...
Sign me up.
Yeah, to not skip
Okay,
over.
I can do it.
He didn't just appear like a genie out of a lamp and say you got to listen to everything I say. He demonstrated it in every possible way.
And so the question maybe to that, Liz, is he doing that today? Okay, modern idolatry. Okay, we got this, that, and the other thing. Is God above it? Is he showing himself? Okay, he didn't part that Red Sea. I mean, my Red Sea. He parted that Red Sea. But what is the thing that he is doing to prove or to win that worship? Our adoration, our bowed knee before him. And I think maybe that's kind of a question that we'll flush out today.
Yeah.
But when I think about this, now that you've said that,
Yeah.
they've separated the Red Sea and delivered us out of Egypt and bringing us up into the Canaan, the promised land. He says, you shall have no other God before me in Exodus 3. And that's number 1. And then number 2 commandment.
Exodus 20, verse 3, yeah.
Yeah, Exodus 20, verse 3. And then Exodus 20, verse 4 is commandment number 2, you shall not make for yourself a carved image. I was thinking carved image, and we looked up the Greek word, which is awesome. Idolatria.
Yeah.
Idolatria.
Yeah. It doesn't look like the word idolatry because it's spelled differently, but when you hear it pronounced, it is almost the exact word.
I remember the
idolatry.
latria part, but I don't remember the idolo part. But the idolo means image in Greek.
Yep. Image, worship.
And then latria means service or participation, like image service, image participation. You're participating or becoming part of through your eyes and through your heart, through whatever senses.
Yeah. Serving that image.
Towards that image.
Yeah.
So that kind of nails it to the wall right there. And in 1 Corinthians 10:14, Paul specifically uses this word and says, flee idolatria.
Yeah. Flee from idolatry.
Idolatry.
Yeah.
So here's the warning. Okay, it's out there. Now, when we get these 2 commandments and think about them a little bit, we can compare them to God's mighty hand, and then also know and be warned that I am susceptible. I think that's a real key part to this, that I am prone to wander.
Yeah.
I get mixed up between images. And
That
I
is
think
so huge. I
that's
think
something to talk about.
Yeah, like the idea that idolatry is a kind of ancient, absurd idea. Perhaps some of us think of it that way. Like where none of us have golden calves, that
totem
we're
poles.
worshiping. Okay, so first of all, there are still many people in the world who do. So
Yes.
for those who are listening outside of America who live in, for example, a Buddhist country or a Hindu country.
Yes.
Idols and worshiping of those idols, bringing them food and money and your devotion is absolutely still going on. So modern idolatry is ancient idolatry in some places. It looks exactly the same.
We're talking about like Western idolatry.
But
maybe.
I think, when we think modern idolatry, we're thinking about the developed world and our postmodern, post-Christian, and then even just us as Christians, because like you said, throughout the New Testament, there is a call to believers to flee from idolatry.
Yes.
So it's not just for the non-Christian, but for those of us who recognize that we have wandering hearts, that we see ourselves in the people of Israel. There is such an important thing we would miss if we would not see ourselves in the pages of the Old Testament that speak to the unfaithfulness of the people of Israel. They're stiff-necked people.
Yes.
They are a stubborn people.
Well, isn't that it? Like if you are reading the Old Testament and you see, like we can have the opportunity to see ourselves there. Like that is the answer. That is countering the modern idolatry, like behavior and susceptibility.
Yeah.
If we can do that, if we can say, hey, look at me, I'm right there, the next chapter after they leave Mount Sinai and they start complaining.
It's a very healthy habit.
And they start turning. Like, I think it's so important. Isn't that good? Like,
it is good.
That's maybe the recommendation today, just right off the bat.
Yeah, and obviously, like, theologically speaking, not everything in the Bible you are and should be applied directly to you. Okay, so we're not saying that. But absolutely, when you look at the picture of the people of Israel being rescued out of their bondage in Egypt, being rescued for nothing that they could have done to do that for themselves, taken out of Egypt by the mighty hand of God and brought to a safe and fruitful land, it is absolutely a parallel to the story of our salvation, that we have been taken out of the world and out of the bondage of sin and into the kingdom of his son.
So
yeah.
Let's just go add to that. Numbers 33. Moses is speaking to Joshua and the people of Israel before they go and cross over the Jordan. And he uses two words to describe what I think is very compared to what we would say going to or through or over the Jordan is like going over or through the cross. And there's two words that are used, drive out and destroy. Drive out the inhabitants, okay? And I think that really speaks to maybe many things, but we could say like it is my self-life, it is what is populating my mind, the thoughts, the things that are going against the name of God, the person of God, the competing nature, because that's what we're talking about with idolatry.
Yeah.
That little idol is trying to compete with the living God, right?
Yeah.
So it says drive out the inhabitants, and then number 2, destroy every single figured stone, every metal image, and demolish every high place. I love that phrase, high place. That's like...
And that speaks to because most people would build their temples and altars on the high places, right?
So as they would walk through the valleys and through the roads, you would see them. Like when we living in Turkey, you would see everything has a high place.
Yeah, it's up high.
Whether it's a castle, a wall, a stone, a house.
In Pergama, the temple is built up on the hill with the city surrounding
next
it.
to like that
it's incredible.
huge tree. So
it's like exalted, right? Like the idea of a high place is that it's something that's exalted, it's lifted up.
Yeah, but God gave Moses this insight, and not insight, but a commandment.
Yeah.
But it was wisdom, because he knew who we were by nature. And he knew even that he needed to help the leaders, like Joshua.
Right, because it sounds extreme. And I think as you're reading, even when you read the laws that God gives, you can be like, geez, this is a little extreme. Like, don't we have any wiggle room here? And the point is that our hearts are so desperately wicked that he is trying to hem us in from like every side to walk in a righteous way before him, out of love, right? Of course, out of love. God desires our worship, and he is a good God. So when we talk about idolatry and how God, it says, within the 10 Commandments, God says, I'm a jealous God in that verse 4, Exodus 20. And when we think about that, we need to recognize that it is the most incredibly marvelous thing that God is jealous for us. Like, it's so incredible.
Wow.
And it's not something that should be like, like, leave me alone, let me do what I want. It is that the God of the universe, the I am, who is outside of everything created, he is the only uncreated one, that he is jealous for us. For people, for men and women, not for all of creation, the beautiful things he has done in creation, but for us. And the alternative to that, to accepting that truth and that beautiful place of worshiping him, is idolatry. Yeah. And I want to get, because we got a lot, we have so much we want to talk about, but I want to talk about one of the things that when I was thinking about idolatry, that hit me right between the eyes, and I think it just brings home the severity of it as we're thinking about it in our lives today, what we're calling modern idolatry, the things that can creep into our hearts, the things that can displace God from his rightful place on the throne of our hearts, as we like to say to our kids. As we're thinking about that, it's so often throughout the Old Testament when we talk about idolatry, it is a breaking of covenant with the Lord. So when he gave those commandments to the people, he made a covenant with the people. And the covenant became like a marriage. And then throughout all of the prophets and the minor prophets, when they talk about the people of Israel and their unfaithfulness, that word unfaithfulness immediately gives us the imagery, and they use this imagery throughout the Old Testament, of adultery. Yeah. To be unfaithful to God, to turn from him and his love and seek love and purpose and belonging and provision and safety from any other thing, person, place, whatever, it is equated to adultery. And I think that that's a really important thing for us to just kind of sit with a little bit, because all of us recognize how incredibly wrong and hurtful and destructive adultery is, right? And how sacred the covenant of marriage is. I think all believers, we acknowledge that the covenant of marriage between a man and a woman is sacred. And what the Bible is saying is that you also have a covenant with your Lord. The one God, the one true God, has made a covenant with you, and you have made it with him. And to step out on him, that's how it's portrayed. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, especially in the book of Hosea. But all throughout, you'll see it connected to, related to adultery. And it's like stepping out on God and saying, you've done all this for me. You've loved me with a steadfast love. You've shown me mercy. You've blotted out my sins, and I'm going to step out on you? It's like, that's heavy. That is very serious. And it's not to say that we live in condemnation as believers, right? But let's be on guard. God forbid, like, we don't want to do that to our Savior. We don't want to do that to our God. We want to show him always our constant loyalty, our devotion, our worship, our reciprocating love, right?
And in Hosea, let's just go there. We heard at the marriage getaway at our church here last Saturday morning, a couple, Anna and Neil, who've spoken on the Grace Hour show, and have so much to give, and really great. It was so wise and such really stirring content that resonated.
Yeah.
And Neil brought up the fact, just as a simple picture, there are two main players or figures in the book of Hosea. One is Hosea himself, and then one is this harlot, this
His
woman
wife, yeah.
who is going to be his wife, and her name is Gomer. And he just said, for simple understanding and to position all of us and to find ourselves like as to who we are in this picture, because this book is given to us
Yes.
to read and to think about, that many times a husband would think to himself to be Hosea, to be the man of God, the righteous one who is out to go and do God's work and command, and to marry Gomer, the harlot, and take on all the problems and take on the sin and redeem her. But he said, you are wrong to think that. He's just like, yes, I think I know where you're going. You are saying, and Neil went on to say, he said, we are all Gomers. Like, don't even think that you are in God's place, because Hosea is representing God. He's God in the picture.
Yeah.
You men are Gomers. And really, like, we all are. And in a way, like, that is such a beautiful, it is the right biblical arrangement as to how we see not only ourselves, our total depravity, but also our God.
Yes.
And that's the picture of worship versus idolatry. One is steadfast and faithful and movable. But the other, we know who that is. And it's not my wife or my husband.
Yeah.
It's both of us.
Yes.
And I think that really like sets the record straight, doesn't it? It's like, if there's any muddy water, any gray lines, no, we're all Gomers.
Yeah, I mean, well, because really, if you read Hosea, it's a pretty strong book to read, because it's really making an incredibly clear case against the people of Israel, while also making a clear case against Gomer, his unfaithful wife, because it's this parallel that God, like, literally intentionally chose for Hosea to portray. He told Hosea to go and marry an adulterous woman, and then proceed to allow her to come back, to restore her, to promise that if she would be faithful to him, that he would continue to be faithful to her and to love her. And it's a parallel with God saying to the unfaithful heart of Israel, and also to us, that I've made a marriage covenant with you. And when you return to me, I will be here for you. I will come after you. I will love you. So like you said, it's really a study of the heart of God. It is also a condemnation of the human heart, for sure. It is a condemnation of the human heart. Like, it's strong. And some of the pictures given here in regards to idolatry are, pretty intense. There's words here that are used that you don't hear every day. And if you look at Hosea 4:12, it talks about idolatry in a very clear way. It says, my people inquire of a piece of wood.
Just stay right there.
Wait, and their walking staff gives them oracles. My people inquire of a piece of wood, and their walking staffs give them oracles, which is like giving them like prophetic word or into the future type thing. Wow. So the comedy is real. Like, the irony is so heavy. And you see this also in Isaiah 44, when it talks about the man who goes into the forest and picks out a good tree and cuts it down. And he takes some of that wood and he uses it for a fire to warm himself and make himself a meal. And then he takes some of that wood and he carves it into an image, and then he worships it. It sounds absurd to us.
Far-fetched.
It sounds absurd,
I don't do
like
that.
Ridiculous. Like, what people are doing this?
Well, I'm modern.
Yeah, like, we're not like that. We are advanced. We're not so rudimentary in our thinking. That
Neanderthal.
Yeah, like these people had big foreheads. These were not smart people. We're smart people, But really, like, can we just sit for a second and recognize how many things we allow to turn us from our devotion to God? How many times have we been double-minded where there has been something, someone, a desire, that has displaced God from the throne that he absolutely still sits on. But in your heart, you have displaced him.
Because so let's all admit something. We all worship something. Everyone is inquiring of something. No one's not inquiring or worshiping. We're all finding something to worship. And that is like the true nature of it, is that, remember we were talking about this before, like God made us in his image.
Yeah.
We bear his image, right? This word image is very key.
Yeah.
We fall in the garden and sin is born and we're conceived in that sin. And so the image is tarnished and broken and it's now looking for a realignment or an identity or a something or someone to help find or help understand why this has happened, why my image is searching but cannot find what it needs. Like
it went right back to the 2 weeks ago, our episode on identity and having a misplaced identity. These things are directly connected.
Yeah.
We talked about the orphan spirit, that if we live in a spirit of that we are an orphan, that we don't belong in the family of God, that we don't have a name, that we don't have an inheritance, that we aren't already chosen, loved, forgiven, accepted, redeemed.
Right.
But we live outside of that, and we can.
Yeah.
Idolatry is the next step.
It's right around the
because
corner.
all you're doing is seeking purpose, identity, value, fulfillment, right? A lot of idolatry, I think today, has to do with just our desires, that we idolize our own pleasure. And we think that that's acceptable, So I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit.
No, I think we're right on track with inquiring of a piece of wood.
Yeah.
I would encourage all of us to insert something else. My people inquire of blank, a piece of blank, a check, a career, a stamp of approval, a
position,
a like, a certain image, a certain recognition.
Yeah. We
crave maybe, and we can dive into that a little bit, but the modern world is craving a more sophisticated version, but it's wood.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we're looking for that,
and it's man-made,
answer.
Right? So what is so twisted about idolatry is a tree is God's creation. Okay? It's you could never, as a human being, manufacture a tree.
Right.
It is purely the miraculous creation of God that a seed would grow and become a tree.
Think about now the things that we're pulling out of the earth.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what's the most important thing that we need for our cell phone? It's that one.
It's these minerals and metals, special metals.
It's these special metals. I forgot what it's called.
We went to that museum and they showed us all the metals that came. It's like selenium or something.
Yeah, and it's like a battle right now.
And we're like, look what we made. We're like, look at us. Look at our amazing.
Right. If we can get that out of the ground, this is going to revolutionize.
But the point is, it's come from God. Literally, the tree was made by God, and now you're going to cut it down and carve it into so it doesn't look like a tree and it looks like a person or a cow or whatever. And you're going to say that this is something worthy of worship. Okay. It's so blasphemous. And it's because God is like, I made you and I made that tree.
Yeah.
And I made the metal that you use on the blade to carve it. And you're going to set this thing up in your house and worship it instead of me. And I think we do that. We absolutely do that. Because it says also the other verse in Hosea, well, if you finish verse 12, it says, So my people inquire of a piece of wood, and
This
their
is good.
walking
Oh,
staff
yeah.
gives them oracles. For a spirit of whoredom has led them astray, and they have left their God to play the whore. These are not words we see often or hear often if we do not mix with certain company, which I do not. So these are not words we're talking about often, but this is talking about our hearts.
Yeah.
A spirit of whoredom, very much like the orphan spirit, is a person who doesn't know what they have in God. To recognize if you're in a relationship, in a marriage, why would you step out on that person? There's a myriad of reasons, but all of them are connected to thinking that that person is not enough or you are not enough. And it's the same in our relationship with the Lord. If we think we are not enough and we have that orphan spirit, we will go and try to be enough some other way.
Yes.
And if we think that God is not enough, then we will go and look for something that we think will fulfill us and be enough.
And
right?
and so that spirit is really, we know that's from the kingdom of darkness. It's from the devil. Like these spirits are here on the earth, and they know as they populate the earth, as man is populating the earth, they are also populating the earth with those idols, with those high places.
Yeah.
And it's like, really, the more there's idols and the more population, the more we're going to fall into like that population of like,
Yes.
it's like this road used to be a road to the town, but now it's like become like this route that is filled with billboards and signage and everything from right to left.
Yeah.
You can't go down this road without seeing everything that's on it.
Yeah.
So here we
that's
have
true.
the devil's like this is his play, right? This is his plan in action as it folds out in the modern world.
Yeah.
So let's like get a little practical,
Yes, yeah.
because we said in Numbers 33 that Joshua and was commanded that when you cross over the Jordan, like
tear him down.
it's not just going to the cross.
Clean the place out.
Right? Because we learn about it that this is our frame of reference in the place of our deliverance.
Yeah.
But on the other side, we like continuing to be, I think we use the word vigilant. Like we have to be on guard.
Yes.
That like if there's a high thing and in our modern world, things that are coming up against the living God.
Yep.
Because remember, all these little idols, when we think about worship, Jesus said, I'm looking for the true worshipers. There will be true worshipers in John 4:23. And that true is the same word for true in John 15. Like I am the true vine. And what it means in the Greek, it means not in name or resemblance only. It's not just in name or resemblance only, but it's in nature.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that we need to learn to do as Christians, is to learn what has a nature, what has a living nature, or we could say what has a divine nature, what is good. This is where wisdom comes in and discerns that this does not have what I need. It does not answer my questions when I inquire of it. When I look for the help that I need, as a kind of like disrespects an idol.
Yeah.
And in verse 5, I love this verse. It's one of my favorites. It's like your idols are like scarecrows in cucumber patches.
Cucumber field. Yeah.
Like I think of it this way, that your idols that you think are so important to you, like cucumbers, I think. Why do you need a scarecrow to protect cucumbers? None of the animals are eating these cucumbers. They're like not even valuable.
What power does a scarecrow have? Like it's not actually powerful.
You could look at it that way too.
It looks scary too. And is it also in that portion where he says you have to nail down your idols so they don't fall over?
Right, because they can't walk and they can't talk.
So in Hosea,
and they can't even do evil or good.
At the end of Hosea, there's a verse I really like that I think, and I want to move on to talking a little bit more about like safeguards against idolatry in our hearts. but this verse really struck me. This is Hosea is kind of giving a script that when the people of Israel are ready to return to God, this is what they should say. And he says here in 14 in verse 3, I'll just read the B part. It says, "And we will say no more, our God, to the work of our hands. In you the orphan finds mercy." We will say no more to the thing that we made, our God. Like we're going to recognize that the things we've made with our hands, the things that we've gathered, the things that we've propped up, we're not going to call them God anymore. And I think that's the calling to every one of us when we find ourselves in like that wayward place in our hearts.
Yeah.
Because again, when we talk about idolatry today, we recognize that most of us are not going to a temple that's full of carved golden idols somewhere. But it is absolutely possible that we would have idols that are on the throne of our hearts, that are lifted up above God. And I think that's what we need to be on guard towards. The word vigilant comes up a lot, I think, in our conversations, just that spiritually it would be foolish to think that we are not constantly under attack in the sense that the world system has been designed to draw us and draw our hearts, our loyalty, our devotion, our focus, our single-mindedness away from God, from the one true God. We have to acknowledge that system is there and that our own hearts are prone to turn from God. If you know those two things, they should be massive flashing warning signs that I need to be vigilant. I need to put safeguards in place in my life because I would never want to find myself stepping out on God.
Okay. So how do we let's give some answers, some practical ways to counter or combat modern idolatry. I think the first thing that I think of is the word faith. And you would say, well, Raj, that's not something you're putting in my hand. That's not a tool that you're saying I can go order on Amazon. It is not something I can check off a list and do today.
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's none of those things. And yet there it was in Exodus chapter 20. There it was in every bit of Exodus with Moses and the Lord, that Joshua would have to do the same thing. He was going to have to trust and obey God. They were given, you could say, maybe a great advantage because God came to them down by a cloud, and God presented himself as fire and by a cloud at night. But today in the modern world, we know without a shadow of a doubt that these truths have standed the test of times, these true historical stories. And they're in a similar way playing out today, where if I go my own way, I know what happens. We as Christians have put our trust in Jesus, and he said, believe in me. Yeah. So faith, I think, is one of the elements that's going to counter the eyes. So I was thinking about modern idolatry. I think about in our day, it's modern eyes. We have, our eyes today are unlike our eyes have never been before been.
Yeah.
Our eyes are so unfiltered now. We have just consumed everything from the eye gate. Everything has come through here like never before. And that's because an oversaturation
the access we have
of these idols. Our modern eyes today, I don't think in any time have ever struggled so much to focus on one thing.
Yeah.
Our complacency and just going about in the blink of an eye from one snap to the next, right? Yeah. We're talking about high speeds of our eyes moving from one clip to the next clip. And another thing I think about the modern eyes is that they have lost a sense of reality. Our modern eyes are drawn to fantasy, not to reality.
Wow.
You know, like that's where I think our idolatry stems from, is a real focus on the eyes. Like if you were to take a good look at your eyes and be like, dude, what do you filter through them every day?
Yeah.
Like, how do you...
And how much of reality are you taking in? That's a really good question.
Right? And can you focus on that one thing for 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes? Like, I tell myself, come on, Raj.
Yeah.
Like, put it together. Like, pull it together.
Back.
Put that phone aside and just stick your chin down. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
well, you were saying, too, when we were talking about this, that the eyes are so powerful because we're visual people, and I think we prioritize things that are visible and tangible. And one thing I would say in terms of a safeguard against idolatry in our own hearts is to always be recognizing the unseen. Yeah. That we live in a world where there's a lot we can see with our eyes, but the Lord makes it very clear that what is unseen is what matters and what will last also. It says that, where is it? It's in 1 John 2. Actually, I just want to read it because it's really good. And I don't want to get it wrong. But it talks about the lust of the eyes. And I think that it makes sense that the lust of the eyes it's just powerful because we are visual. We see it. We can see it in front of us.
Right.
And then we want it. We want the thing that we can see. So
can I quote one verse while you're looking for that one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Proverbs 27:20, Sheol and Abdon are never satisfied, and never satisfied are the eyes of man. Proverbs 27:20. The eyes of man are never satisfied.
Yeah.
Let's face it.
Yeah.
And that's where we're going with this, right?
Yeah, it says in 1 John 2, and I'll read 15, 16, and 17. It says, "Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh and the desires of the eyes and pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world is passing away along with its desires. But whoever does the will of God abides forever." So what's being presented to us is that, okay, there is a powerful draw from the things that you see with your eyes. But the truth is that this world is passing away along with all of its desires.
Yes. And what is viewed is connected to our heart, right? Like what goes into the eyes comes through the mind and into the heart.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful that the things that are passing away, we don't get caught up or like the lines get mixed in this modern world between like what's passing away and what is like not.
Yeah.
You know, isn't that like we just come out of these funks even a minute or two of just like, whoa,
so true.
I just got taken down the road of eternity, and it wasn't. It was definitely temporal.
Yeah.
Like we look not at the things of
things that are seen,
but the things that are not seen. For the things that are seen are transient in the ESV, transient. They're like on a train ride that's going nowhere.
That's a safeguard, right? Like to be able to regularly ask yourself, is this transient? Is this temporal or not? And if it is temporal, then put it in its place. It goes well below your devotion to God. Put it in its place.
And I think you have to say that out loud.
Because we were talking like, I'm like, man, like it says like to worship God with your whole heart, but like a sandwich is so good. Like if you just have a really good sandwich, it tastes so good.
Like God, you didn't give me a sandwich.
Like there's like very basic, simple things that meet our are pleasurable. They just meet a need, and they just hit us. They hit the sweet spot. And we're like, man, that was so good. And it is very. If you don't see the unseen, if you don't recognize the eternal, it's very logical to continue to seek after those pleasures.
Right.
They feel good, and this is my life. But if your life is bigger than that, if your life is meant to glorify the uncreated, eternal God so that you will then live forever with him. If that is your thing, then pleasures,
Yes.
they have their place and they don't even come close. You would never even dream of prioritizing them over God.
Yeah, you wouldn't. And so you start mixing faith with what you hear, right? In Romans chapter 10, verse 17, like, faith comes by hearing and hearing the word of God. We take the faith, and then what's another thing that helps? For me, has hands down been being around people of faith.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Their diet, their lifestyle, which wasn't transient.
Yeah.
Well, I was like, you're living something eternal. You're doing the opposite. You're going up the river.
Yeah.
You don't have a spirit of whoredom.
Yeah.
Like you are not selling yourself out to the closest click and the closest like and the best picture.
And the reason we do that is because we know we need to be around them. We are susceptible. So let's surround ourselves with, and I love the verse in Ephesians 5:1, it says, be imitators of God. So there's a great safeguard. How can we be imitators of God? We have to have people in our lives who are Christ-like, who are showing us what it is. That's why Paul said, be imitators of me. He also wrote, be imitators of God. So what's he saying? He's saying, in the way that I am like Christ, be like me. And we need to have those people in our lives. Another thing I wanted to bring up, as we do have to wrap up soon, I think, is that there's a few different times in the epistles where specifically being covetous is related to idolatry. And I wanted to bring that up.
That can be our last point.
In it's mentioned in Colossians 3. There's a list of sins that are given, and covetousness is there, and it says which is idolatry. And then again, in Ephesians 5, it also says that to be covetous, the one who is covetous is an idolater. So, if that is true,
that's a clue, right? There's something
I was
there.
saying to you, I'm like, man, like what? Why is specifically being covetous being an idolater? And one way to think about it is that to covet something, like God's given you a life. He's given you what you have and what you need, and He asks you to have faith and to trust Him for everything. Seek Him first, and all these things will be added. So that's what He's asking of you. So to be covetous is to look at what somebody else has, to look at something outside of what God has given you, and to say, I want that. And it's like wanting to reach outside of God's will. It's wanting to get something that God has not chosen to give you. And so what that means is that I have a desire that now I've placed over God. So, I think that's incredible to think about.
How do we wrap this up? Maybe we just say, instead of focusing so much on the idolatry part and trying to okay, well, what am I worshiping?
Right.
Focus on the worship part.
Yeah.
Godliness with contentment is great gain. Okay? Godliness means, in the Greek, it means good worship. Good worship leads to contentment. Good worship leads to being satisfied. If we can hit the target, which is Jesus, and His life and His love and His person on the cross, when I focus on Him, my Savior, I want to touch and hold Him. Be merciful to me. I want to get a hold of you today. Be real. Come into my life. Talk to me. I want to talk to you. Making worship, good worship. Godliness is good worship. It's a good form.
Yeah.
All of the other things can fade away. That's how I think of it. Instead of I'm going to fix A, B, and C, which clearly have gone awry.
Right.
Go back to the feet of Jesus, right? Go back to that woman.
Return to Him.
Right. I am Gomer. Help me and take me. And He goes, yes, you are my Ephraim. I marry you.
That's so beautiful. I think that there's incredible wisdom and grace when I hear you say that, because it's not that we are able to even fix ourselves, that we are even able to remove the idols from our hearts, but we can turn.
Yes.
We can return to God. And we can do that only because of his grace and only because of his mercy. We go boldly to the throne of grace. I think about that verse so often, that it's my right and my privilege as a daughter of God and you as a son of God, that in our idolatry, when we step out on God, when we are unfaithful to our good, kind, loving God, that in a moment we can return to him, and we never have to question if he will take us back, because he has made it clear over and over again that he will always take us back, and his love does not change.
Amen.
So when we place anything, any good gift, anything over the amazing giver of good things, or when our loves are disordered, like we've talked about in past episodes, we can return to him.
Yes.
And that is the good news that, as we're going to be talking about idolatry all week, to keep in mind.
Yes.
Right?
Ooh, this is going to be a great week.
It is going to be a great
Can't wait.
week. So, hey, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope this has been thought-provoking, encouraging. Please don't forget to subscribe to the Grace Hour Show on YouTube, on Spotify, and wherever you listen.
Send it to
and
your
be
friends.
sure to tune in tomorrow as we keep talking about this incredible topic of idolatry today. Thanks.